You know what? How many times do you say, "Let's keep in touch," right? And you mean it when you say it, and then, a year goes by, 2 years go by, and, like, what happens to the time, right?
I mean, and the thing is, I think all adults feel a little lonely. I've talked to so many people who say, "How do you make friends as a grown up? How do you form those connections outside of school or outside of work?" Everyone feels that way, but they're just siloed. And I met an author months and months ago, and he wrote a book about keeping in touch. And Todd, can I tell you, I think about him constantly. I think about the book constantly. It's such a creepy thing to say out loud, considering I maybe spent 20 minutes with this man, but he really had an impact on my attitude when it comes to that. So I thought, let's have the man himself here,
Let's do it.
Jason Levin. Thank you so much for joining us today and for all of your insight that I speak so highly of everything that you are bringing to the table.
You're tearing me up, Yasmeen. You're tearing me up. Joy, fluffy bunnies, and rainbows. I love it. I love it. And
That's what
I'm
we do
thrilled.
here at HQ, yes.
But I'm thrilled that you're leaning into your own what I like to call your personal keep in touch party, because what you're describing in terms of loneliness is just such a real thing. I mean, even this year, the Surgeon General in America said that we have an epidemic of loneliness in this country. And like there's a 6-point plan on how we need to become less lonely. And I mean, it's exactly it. It's like we're adults now, and it's like, we don't have recess anymore that, would bring us together. So.
It's true. And I think in some ways, like the pandemic, I'm curious to get your take on that. And as a person who sort of followed this, what do you think the impact of the pandemic was on people actually getting in touch and staying in touch?
It's funny. I think one of the reasons I wrote the book during the pandemic was that I was lonely. I missed my friends. And frankly, this is a book I've always wanted to write.
I feel like you've covered some of the biggest lies that we all kind of tell each other, right? and the biggest one we always say is, let's keep in touch. Although you don't mean it at the time, right?
No.
But it's that, and also one day I'm going to write a book. So you have tackled those two lies that we all say and tell each other all the time. So hats off to you, sir. Hats off.
Thank you. Now I have always been fascinated with "let's keep in touch." That phrase, like for decades I've been, and I've lived abroad, and people that don't live in America, they're like, "Jason, what does it mean when Americans say keep in touch?" They mean goodbye.
Yeah, it's like a throwaway sentence. Yeah, like, I don't know how to end this conversation.
It means goodbye. and so I said to, I've always been fascinated, like, what if we tried? What if each one of us, in our own genuine way, really made an attempt to connect and reconnect with the people we already like, know, and trust throughout our lifetime? There's two things. One, it will help your career. The social science is clear on that. And two, it'll make you feel better. It'll make you, what we have realized, and the studies have shown coming out of the pandemic, is that, it's more than food, water, and safety that are the foundations of being a human. It's connection. It's that important. So actually keeping in touch makes us feel better. Lets us stand up a little bit taller. And I'm barely 5'8". So, that's, these are important things.
But everybody, I think, has that insecure. I had a buddy who just left his job, and he had a going away party. And I was talking to him a few hours before. He's like, what if nobody comes? Everybody wants to be invited to the party, but nobody wants to do the inviting. And everyone is so insecure. Same here. I never invite people over because I'm like, what if I'm inconveniencing you? And then what if you say no?
Right. We have normal human emotions that go on in our heads that actually in the academic community are known as barriers to reconnection. And so in my book, I talk about it as the Bermuda Keep in Touch Triangle. So just where ships and planes went to be gone forever and never to be seen again. So do we have our own emotions that hold us back. And the three foundational emotions, after talking with experts in the mental health community and looking at the research, it's guilt, it's fear, it's worry. And what you're describing, Yasmeen, are these natural Bermuda keep in touch triangle emotions that are just like, nah, I'm not that interesting. People don't want to hear from me. I haven't made it. Like you starting off the conversation that 20 minutes together, and then like you can't, you're thinking about this. I'm like, oh my God. I'm like, all right, I'll ride that for the rest of the day. At dinner time with my 10 and 12-year-old. Did you realize that I had 20 minutes with somebody? They're like, whatever, Dad. But I think you're right in that the more that we can acknowledge these normal human emotions that are holding us back from connection, the more that we can, as a society, be kinder to ourselves, to recognize that we're, we don't have to show up as this perfect person, that, that we, it's the ultimate paradox. We want connection, and yet we're worried that people actually don't like us and want to be with us. It's crazy, the human mind. Neuroscience is wacky. It's wonderful.
Yeah, and to that point, I've in your research, what's the best answer as to why we are all screwed up in the noodle? Like, why do we have those demons that we got to fight through? Even though we know, as you talked about, like during the pandemic, as evidence, we all need that sort of social connection.
So it goes back to the reason we run from bears, and that we're taught to fear things. Because if we're taught to fear things, that helps with our own survival. And here's the craziest thing. The psychology is pretty clear on how to get over it. How do you get away from the emotional to the rational? Write it down. Write it down. Write down what is it that you're concerned about? There's in psychology, it's known as the most likely scenario exercise. So Yasmeen's worried about nobody showing up at her party. And you can say, all right, what's the craziest, worst scenario that would happen if nobody showed up at your party? Yasmeen would be crying, and it'd be terrible, and like her life would be over.
I'm emotionally unstable, Jason.
Yeah,
that's what would happen.
And so you write that down, and then you say, well, what's the best possible scenario for Yasmeen's party? 1,000 people show up. They all write Yasmeen into her will. They think that Yasmeen is the most incredible human being to walk the earth. And again,
I like that world. Let's spend some time here.
Let's spend time in that world. And then we're like, what's the most likely scenario as we're writing things down, going from the amygdala down into the logical? They show up at the party. Yasmeen, how you doing? Good to see you. That's it. But we need to go through that exercise because as human beings, we are, as the 1.0 brain that we have, we fear things. And I'm just saying that's okay. And let's embrace that and not call it anything else than it needs to be, that we're human. But it's like a retraining of your mind. And when you get into the retrain of your mind, then you actually have the opportunity to connect. So,
well, I know you already touched on, I guess, your signing off moment, because you had a very successful career, coaching, consulting, all of these things, and then it sounds like it was the pandemic, and you're like, let me follow through on writing this book. Was it a specific moment? A day where you were like, this is it?
Well, it's funny that you go back to, keeping in touch and writing a book. And when I went out on my own 12 years ago and I said I was going to write the book, and my wife's like, awesome. So I'm going around, hey, I want to write a book. I want to write a book on keeping in touch. And everybody's patting me on the head. Oh, that's nice. And as we all know, when like you go out on your own, at the very least, you have to make an income, and there's no like immediate income from writing a book. So I was like, all right, well, let me go build the business and I'll shelve the book idea. And every year after year after year, all right, I'm going to write the book this year. And people would see me speak. Jason, you should write a book. I'm like, I already have one. It's called Relationships to Infinity. I'm procrastinating. Like year 4, year 5, my wife writes a book while I'm talking about writing a book. He wrote a book on helping moms returning back to work from maternity leave. And so I'm still talking. And then finally, when the pandemic hit, something really special happened. A Bloomberg journalist who I had done some radio segments with, she not only told me I should write a book, she came up with the solution also. Jason, I wrote a book through Georgetown's book writing class. I think you have a book in you. I think you should take the class. I signed up for that class as fast as I could because I realized I ain't doing this myself. And what the class taught me, it gave me accountability, gave me community. And I love when the book professor talked about books are not written, books are rewritten. The hardest part is getting that initial draft and being comfortable saying to yourself, this is terrible, but at least the page is not blank anymore.
You know what? I mean, it's so funny, Jason, because I have this, and Yasmeen and I always talk about it. I know we can't see it, but I don't know if you know the author, Anne Lamott, Lamott.
Bird by Bird.
And
Bird
she,
by Bird.
And she says, and her sort of encouraging words are, your first draft is always going to suck.
Yes.
And talk about like writing is rewriting, and I keep that here, so Yasmeen and I talk about it all the time because that's where I think there's when it comes to creating and the written creative process. I know for me, the hard thing is you talk yourself out of it, kind of like, what, I'm not going to call that friend or whatever. I don't want to bother him. And then, it's the same thing. You go to write something like, this is going to suck. This is terrible. And you kind of freeze.
Yeah. And my wife knew I was serious about the book because the only time I could find time to write was like on mornings, on the weekend when my kids are sleeping. And I'm a night owl. Like you can't get me out of bed before like 10 in the morning or 11 in the morning on weekends. On Saturdays and Sundays, I was writing at 7:30. And I'm like, I have to hit my weekly word count from my editor who's demanding this of me. And so I just started putting the words on page. And it's kind of like Tetris after a while. You get words on page. You're like, oh, this belongs over here. This belongs over there. We need this. We need a little bit more academic research here. How about a story from an interview over there? And you start to build the equation. But it's fun to have someone that like knows what the hell they're doing in all of this, that to have a Sherpa of sorts, and to like, channel and funnel out. Like there were a lot of things that went on the cutting room floor, but at the end, I think at the end of the day, it was that getting used to the versioning, right? This is V1, this is V2, and we're just going to keep versioning until it's right and authentic and true. So, and that's work.
And now you have a physical book. What?
My baby. It's my baby.
What was it like to hold your book in your hand for the first time? I'm so jealous of that.
Let me tell you something. I couldn't think straight. I was walking into walls. It was a very emotional experience. Because I'm very tied to this concept. For 30 years now, these are things I've longly held and believed. And it was very scary to put it out into the universe now. It's like, oh my God, everybody else is going to see me for me. It's like connection, right? But like still at the very, so my soul is in this, right? And so, but at the same time to like stand in front of my local bookstore with the book and show to everyone, hey, look, this is what I stand for. This is what I care about, right? Really and truly. So, I said to the head of the book class, I'm like, there was my wife, there's my 2 boys, top 10 putting out book, absolutely within there because it and it just feels good. So I highly recommend for those that are noodling on it. We all have a book on ourselves, and it's just a matter of that daily chip. Put some words on page. I'm going to keep trying. I'm going to keep versioning because we all have a voice to put out in the universe. So.
And to that end, we always talk about that. And it sounds like, you talked about, some advice or guidance that you received, but, what sort of, very succinctly what kind of advice would you give to someone who's sort of where you were, someone who wants to write a book, run a marathon, whatever it is, that certain achievement that they've always talked about, but they're they're kind of stuck and they just can't get going.
Right.
What's the best advice that you received, and what's the best advice that you would pass along to that person?
And it's something I put in the book. All the research shows you don't do anything alone. Anything significant, don't do it alone. This whole notion that I pulled myself up by my bootstraps and wrong. So we win and lose by our community. And so if you are deciding to decide on something, then it's all about bringing in people both on the personal and the emotional. Like, one of my favorite movies is Waterboy. You can do it, and so to have that in the back of your head so that you're in the right mindset. And so it's just building your communities, building your teams, building the set of people that can help you along that journey. And so, I wrote a book on connection. So it's all, for me, it's all about the people. And I think it's the people that help us get to that next step. I think it's the people that are going to allow for us to get things over. And even now that my book's in the universe, it's still people that are like, Jason, keep going, right? And so you need that. We all need that as human beings. So step one is you have an idea, then share it with somebody that actually likes you and will support it and will ask you, all right, what's the next step? What's the next step that you need to do? Do you need to do an outline? Do you need to, interview somebody? What is it that you need to do? What's the next natural step? And you were talking about Ms. Lamont, who has a great quote. It's all about going bird by bird. It's about taking one thing at a time and then the next thing at a time. So I'm a huge fan of community and process and breaking it down into steps so that by the end, like, you have an aggregation of a ton of little steps, and you look at it, you're like, wow, it's done. And I always, and it just so happens I have a wife who wrote a book and is a crackerjack copy editor. So she helped me get it across the finish line. So that
Nice
I literally say I have an editor in house. So
yeah, nice to have that in your back pocket.
Also, I feel like we keep talking about the book and have not said the name enough. Relationships to Infinity is where you can find all of this information. And when you're not writing and reading, we always like to ask everybody, what are you streaming at night or during the day, whenever you're consuming content?
Yeah, what's new? What's out there? What's good?
All right. So my wife and I are totally into Ted Lasso. We just finished up Ted Lasso. Like, amazing, thoughtful, kind, all good. So I'm, born in Brooklyn. I grew up in New Jersey. Watching with my wife, The Marvelous Ms. Maisel, is all about rewatching what my grandparents might have looked like in New York at that time period. And it's freaking hilarious.
Yeah.
With my boys that are 10 and 12, I like to call them the Rock'em Sock'em movies. So anything that my wife does not care about, anything Star Wars related, Marvel related, we will rewatch any of those types of things. We're finally at a point, I've been holding back on it. They're like, Daddy, we need to do this. We're going to hit the Indiana Jones movies now. So, and just to let you know, since we're talking about streaming, and it goes back to fear, Yasmeen, I think you would enjoy this. So I want to share with you my favorite movie.
Tell me.
My favorite movie, it was not well received at the time. It's just not that it wasn't well received. It didn't win anything. It's a movie with Meryl Streep and Albert Brooks. It's called Defending Your Life.
Yes.
So Defending Your Life with Albert Brooks.
That's a great movie.
And why I love the movie, why it's the number one movie in my heart and in my mind, is that the entire movie is about how you've dealt with fear in your life. And what they're asking you is, do you think that you have truly gotten over your fears to do what you need to do, what you were naturally born to do? And so I love that movie as a teenager. Maybe I was an old soul back then, but I actually rewatch Defending Your Life every year just for my own love and inspiration, because I think as we get older, we get afraid of new things, right? That never changes. So that's my last nugget on streaming stuff. Like if it
Love
was
it.
up to me, I would just watch Defending Your Life for all days. I think it's the coolest movie.
And I always love, but real quick, how Meryl's character, like it was such a breeze as she just skated on into heaven. That was great.
Yeah, she skated on to heaven. And what's cool about Judgment City is that you can eat whatever you want. And you never gain weight. I'm like, in my world, that'd be awesome.
Jason, this was such a pleasure. And again, Relationships to Infinity had such a big impact in such a short amount of time. Just talking to you, learning about all of your research and everything that you have to offer and are bringing to the table. And I mean, really a testament to your work. So thank you for all of that. And thank you for stopping by and talking to us. This was so fun.
Thank you, Todd. Thank you, Yasmeen. Yasmeen, I say to you, keep in touch.